had some elements of information from UPR info about the question of reprisals. So there's one issue that we definitely wanted to talk about when thinking about the different issues that have to be taken into consideration when we are preparing the UPR, and that's the issue of civil society. Normally, as you know, in the procedure for the preparation of the state report, the states are supposed to do that in consultation with their civil society. We've discussed about this with UPR Info yesterday. We saw that it's unfortunately too often not taken up seriously. Nevertheless, it is a requirement for the state, so that's a very important instrument as such in order to promote civil society. So the issue of civil society is really a very important one. And I'm very happy that we have Renate Bloem with us for two reasons. First, because she's representing now CIVICUS, and CIVICUS is one of the main active organizations specifically focusing on strengthening civil society throughout the world. And I did some very interesting activities with your who's now leading Greenpeace, but who was leading CIVICUS at that time, coming from South Africa. So it's a real world movement. But also Renate Bloem is one of the, I should almost say, the institutional figure of the NGOs working in the field of human rights here in Geneva. She has an extremely long experience on this issue. And so she's one of the very knowledgeable person in Geneva about the activities of NGOs. So really she has this double competence, and we're very, very pleased to have you with us. And Renate, once again, thank you for joining us. And I'll directly give you the floor.
Yves, thank you for these very, very kind words. And good afternoon. And let me first apologize for being late. And at the same time, I would like to thank you, Yves, to having invited me. It's a great pleasure to see many young people around the table, many also a little bit older, but I think it is great to be among you and to really talk about the UPR, which is now very, very dear to us. And I just want to show you a few slides, and I would also love to afterwards have a very good interaction with you. So let me start here, enhancing the effectiveness of the UPR and as a civil society perspective, because what CIVICUS is doing, maybe we go to the next one and say you a little bit who we are. As you have heard already, it's a global alliance of civil society organization activists dedicated to strengthen citizen actions around the world. And founded in 1993, CIVICUS strives to promote marginalized voices, especially from the global south, and has members in countries, actually in 130 countries throughout the world. So, stimulating the discussion for us with UPR. The UPR has emerged, as you have heard this morning, probably quite extensively, as an international mechanism, as the principal international mechanism to facilitate really to strengthen citizen action. And this unique multi-stakeholder cooperative approach of the UPR has also provided a value platform for civil society organizations to engage with a wide range of government, UN, civil society and other stakeholders on pressing human rights issues. And for that one, really to say for CIVICUS and the UPR, as part of CIVICUS' core objectives to promote really better conditions for civil society, to have stronger influence on decision-making processes. CIVICUS has supported from the beginning its members to contribute to all stages of the UPR. And particularly since the beginning of the second cycle in 2012, CIVICUS has made over 50 UPR submissions on various countries, focusing on restrictions, and that is what is dear to us, on the rights to freedom of peaceful assembly, association, expression, as well as persecution of human rights defenders. And we have also supported hundreds of national civil society organizations from nearly 50 countries to engage in national and international lobbying activities pertaining to the UPR to encourage governments to create and maintain a safe and enabling environment for civil society. So what do we understand by that? Do you understand when we talk about enabling environment for civil society? Do you understand, do you know what we also want to speak? What is civil society space? Do you have any idea what actually is meant? It's a very technical almost expression now, but what do we understand of civil society space? So, I mean, we have supported also our partners in nearly 30 national consultations to develop strategies to engage in the UPR, as well as monitor and support implementation of recommendations. So I think this is already a lot, but I think in order to see that what we have been doing, we have also really tried to evaluate. I mean, to evaluate until now what the UPR process is bringing to civil society. Or in general, how does it really help both to help and promote human rights, to promote the human rights culture, which is the theme of your meeting here, and in which way civil society is really involved in it. So what we did, we have interviewed 15 activists from 15 different countries throughout the world, and as you see, we had from Africa, Zambia, Togo, Rwanda, from Latin America, Venezuela, Brazil, and what you see here, Bahrain, Lebanon, the Gulf region. In Asia, quite a lot of countries, Cambodia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Philippines, Uzbekistan, and in Europe, Serbia and Azerbaijan. Now, if you look at that, it's quite a widespread already. And I think it was very, very helpful for us to see and to have these interviews directly with people from the ground, to see what they had experienced in really being involved in UPR in their own countries. Now, if you see a few things which I have jotted down here, it's of course, I mean, to bring sort of a larger, much broader report back to you with a few sentences. And that is what we have seen, that the UPR is very often used sort of as a battlefield. And as many countries herald this still as the international mechanism which is universal, which has the support of all the countries, we still find in many countries as well that there is a very aggressive way of governments against civil society or against or with in order to pursue and engage their own people in it, saying that is something there in Geneva where our own people go and speak against our own country's values. We have seen this from quite a few countries, and which have then afterwards said this very, very loudly in television interviews and said these people are testing against our own countries. So just to understand that some countries which actually here in the Human Rights Council are very much holding the flag and saying, and we cannot speak on human rights violations only within the range of the UPR. But when it comes then to see in which the UPR is really enacted in some of those countries, we see that they are not upholding the status which is expected from them. And because this is exactly when they feel there is any contest against their government's policy and any voice which is in a way not content with what the government is doing, so they immediately put this away and say, oh, this is some kind of, Geneva talk there, and it is only those who are against us, against actually, if you take Venezuela, they say it's against the revolution which has been taken here, years ago in Venezuela. So others take, very inflammatory language and say, oh, these are foreign NGOs, these are these kind of foreign agents. They bring a different agenda into our countries, and they are not our own agenda. or they are trying to criminalize actually civil society agents and to undermine the legitimacy of the UPR in the eyes of general public in their own countries. And some other countries try, of course, to use this as a podium for grandstanding, to defend their human rights record, rather than addressing shortcomings. We have seen this, you know, in Malaysia and other countries. And as I said already, in Venezuela, by maintaining really an antagonistic approach to UPR, by publicly proclaiming that the process is a test and a battle in which it has to defend the revolution against NGOs and the West. So, or by not addressing human rights deficits, but rather to defend itself from unwarranted criticism from other countries that we also have seen. I mean, these are all the voices which have come from those countries. And I could, of course, identify many, many, many more countries, but I didn't have the time, and you don't have the time either. But you can look at this afterwards. You can. I have also brought you afterwards to bring you some summary reports which CIVICUS has been doing recently on civil society state. In some of the countries we have even seen even more that we have seen a real persecution, intimidation of civil society. We have in many countries activists who are civil societies who speak out against the governments immediately detained. We have them not only detained, we have them sometimes tortured, and some of them have even died. So we have this very, very, I would say it is other countries we have seen creating actually pro-government NGOs who then very proactively come here to Geneva to acclaim pro-government speech here in Geneva to say how great this government is. But these are what we call gongos. I don't know if you've heard that. Gongos are pro-government NGOs created by the government in order to defend their own speech, their own discourse. And in some countries such as Azerbaijan, Ethiopia and Uzbekistan, in very particular leaders of civil society have either been detained or they have left the country, and those who have remained are then always too much afraid and also not being trained enough to have a real impact or to be really being involved in any UPR process. But then, having heard these critical voices, I would say those who have really, and I would say most of those we have interviewed have had really huge barriers, and yet they all have come to say that the UPR is, after all, is a platform which has never been before, and they need to see in which way they build up a national platform to bring civil society somehow together, at least to start to create and, you know, to have some issues on the country's level on the table, which before they could not have. Now, since, as you have heard before, the instituting resolution which created the UPR definitely said that civil society needs to be heard in that. And so governments are being held to have these consultations. Even if they do it in the beginning, trying to, definitely to do it only with their own governments, governmental organizations, their gongos. But at the end, and coming here in the second, and we particularly looking forward now to the third cycle, there is an increase, nevertheless, of awareness. Although we still need to work on that, but there is an awareness that there is a possibility to creating this platform for civil society at the national level, and to see in which way they can use this to build up issues on human rights, and also to see that NGOs, civil society organizations who work on different issues come together to really prioritize on, say, major issues which concern the countries, so that they have, in a way, that they can create one voice. And while this is not possible everywhere, but this was also raised, you know, that there is an awareness, a public dialogue about sensitive issues on a global stage that we have, and they know this. The whole world is watching international, local issues. So this is such, in general, it's an enormous tool, yet also not known enough. But we have, for instance, examples. I remember that in South Africa, which was the first country to be reviewed, and there was no knowledge in the country. There was only some UNDP person who knew it and who then invited all possible NGOs to come together, and they could, since it was from the beginning webcasted, they could see it and start a real dialogue. And this has been going also word by word, and I would say through all social media and public awareness, that the possibility to create these national platforms are there. So, I mean, and particularly also to raise issues which are not normally headlines in their own countries, or even in international headlines and newsletters and so on. So I think the creation of something which somehow also belongs to civil society, this awareness is coming along, although it's not yet totally there. But this was also came also from the interviews from all these different participants. And of course, they immediately said it would strengthen the whole process if they would really, I mean, if all human rights mechanisms would work more together. And I mean, this is a very, very major point, because this kind of working together, it's not just for that. They have said if we could work together with the treaty bodies at least, they are not just a voluntary mechanism, it is really a mechanism which, when governments have adhered to a convention, they have to really implement it, although there might be also in retard, there might be in delay, but they have to do it eventually. So working together with those recommendations coming from treaty bodies, or what we call still the jewels of the human rights mechanisms here in Geneva, these are the special rapporteurs, you know, these 47, 50 people who are independent from also actors. I mean, they are independent individuals, but who have been elected by the council in order to serve the council actually as special procedures, but who are also there to really, I would say, accessible to civil society and to possibly bring more awareness to what civil society is really bringing from the ground. So working together with them, but also with the regional organizations in Africa, particularly with the African Commission on Human People's Rights, with the Latin Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, with all the European bodies, and with any, I would say, human rights mechanism and body, as much as possible. If there is this kind of working together, it strengthens the issue and helps to promote the culture of human rights. And the same is for civil society, really, to coalition building. And it is always this working together, bringing the mechanisms together, but also bringing civil society together. So the meeting you have here, you have how many countries you have here. So it is sharing your views and to see in which way you can also start to building alliances on certain issues, and really building on that and seeing in which countries and where you can align with. And that, I mean, the stronger is the voice, the more you bring together. And that is what we are also trying to do then here in Geneva. We are building this kind of coalitions. As I said, CIVICUS is already a member organization, and we are bringing the members, our members, from the ground. So we are not speaking, they are speaking. Those who are members from the ground, these voices need to be heard. So that is here. And then what is very, very important is at the national level to have these coalitions. I mean, if possible, to have a coalition before the UPR review and then afterwards. You have heard this morning, I think, from UPR Info, and they do very much a UPR pre-session here, which is very helpful. At the same time, we have also helped to support, to organize consultation at the national level, sort of before the UPR review, so that different civil society organizations could come together in order to coalesce and really behind the UPR agenda. And the same is with post-consultations, to really then come and say, this is what our government has said. We need to really test what they have said, what they have accepted as recommendations, and we can build on that. We can build what they have accepted and push this really down to them, that they have to implement that. It cannot be said enough. It all helps to have a strong, strong coalition. This is not any single NGO or any single civil society organization which can do that. You need to work together, and the larger the better. And this, and particular transnational and trans-regional even, and I would say worldwide, that there is this civil society strong voice, and which can each time give also support to other civil society organizations from a different country. So that is this, mutual, to have and engage in this process. And then, they have made, these are not from us, these are all recommendations which they have made to national governments. Of course, the first is the remove legal and policy barriers which undermine an enabling environment. And that we have, unfortunately, said, that is when I would speak on civil society space a little bit more afterwards, and to see that we have seen in the last years that in 90 countries we have seen enacting legislation which has some kind of barriers to civil society to do its work, either in order to get accredited, to register, to do its work. If they speak their mind, then they are immediately, laid aside. So, and all kinds of different legislation have been around the world. We have seen this starting actually in Ethiopia in 2009 with the so-called charity law. And then many countries have just copied and pasted it and have made it into different country actions all over the world. So we have seen this. This is going widely, and as I said, it was documented in 90 countries. We have these kind of legislations, but and that is not that it is not only in the South. That is everywhere. Also in democratic countries, we have seen this more and more happen. I mean, sort of sniping of really democratic situations which we had before, all of a sudden they are sniped away in a way that they are mostly affecting independent civil society, human rights defenders, who are all of a sudden getting less and less space to do their work. Yes, there's still something more here. To the international community, yeah, this is again the institutionalize. That is, of course, this is what is said from those people we interviewed. They want to see it much stronger. An institution is kind of an institution of the creation, civil society-led consultations. That this needs to be part of the UPR process. That these consultations led by civil society become institutionalized in a way that they have to be a must, that this before and after. And then one very, very important thing is establish accountability mechanisms. So you probably have heard this morning that during the UPR process, all those countries have definitely adapted almost hundreds and hundreds of recommendations out in the meantime, but we have no really accountability mechanism. So the council can, of course, we have seen, the countries have to reappear 4.5 years later. They can be asked what they have been doing, but there is it is still all on a very voluntary basis. So those people from those different countries is something which is sounds a bit big. Do you hear me? So, as I say, the accountability mechanism is, of course, not at the moment a very, very difficult thing. We have to see in which way we can really work on that particular issue, to have an accountability mechanism in the council, within the council, to really see that recommendations need to be implemented. So this accountability mechanism is, as of now, not part of the resolution which established the UPR mechanisms. And as you know, if you go one iota away from any resolution, which is sort of the legislative, the substance of anything, then you can imagine how difficult it will be. On the other hand, we are living, and this was all coming this year also, we are living in 2015. You might all have heard that during this year, in New York, they adopted the 2015 plus agenda, what called the Sustainable Development Goals. And in this adapting of the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN, together with many, many civil society organizations, and I would say system-wide, has come to adopt this agenda, which really calls for a transformation of society. So 2015 would be a good date to really ask the UN. We are asking constantly the UN to do something. So this means also when we look forward into next year, into the next third cycle of the UPR, that maybe we can working on creating accountability mechanisms. But this is coming from people from the ground who see, as long as we do not have such mechanisms, governments go home, forget what they said or adapted, and they are not bound by anything. They are not bound by a treaty as they are in general bound by the treaty bodies and by those conventions. So to work on an accountability mechanism is at least a recommendation which came from them. And the other one was the joint consultations we have seen already, and also to work more with possible diplomatic missions, which could maybe have your ear and have your interest to support. If you go into a country and in the country look up all the diplomatic missions which are stationed there, and see when the country comes up for review, if you would create already at that level some support for your recommendations. So once they come here, they have already this kind of laid down general support of some missions on which civil society can then also build up once they are here in Geneva, where they have plenty of opportunity to really encounter and have meetings with maybe the same governments which they have seen and which they have visited in their countries, the missions, and could build up with having more lobbying possibilities here in Geneva. And I would say this is also one of the huge advantages of the UPR, and of course not only the UPR, I would say here in Geneva, the Human Rights Council, that civil society has the possibility to meet very easily here with governments, which they never would have at home. I mean, to see, once you see here in Geneva, during council sessions, you can easily meet during the breaks. You can see over coffee, you can arrange possible meetings with a number of governments and can try to see and persuade them that they should first of all really give their ear to your issues, to your voice, and then try to see that they also speak up once a possibility comes during the review, that they can have some recommendations, putting these recommendations to the government under review. Yeah, we have also heard from some, yes, they have said they feel some civil society organizations which are not, say, generally in Geneva or in New York, they feel it very burdensome to come to the council and to see that they have to look up for any civil society organizations to lend them their umbrella to really have the possibility to speak. So it's a burdensome process, which we all know too well. And at the moment, it's very difficult. That's very difficult to undermine. But I mean, they have come up more and more to see in which way can civil society have better access to the UN. What can be improved? I don't want to go into the details of the UN committee at the moment, but we have already had long processes, and it's difficult. But again, I say what we have seen happening right now. Doing and with the adoption of the 2015 agenda, there has been some opening in this process. So I mean that these nevertheless recommendations were there, and much more difficult again, but still also create specific sanction mechanisms to governments who persecute civil society. And that you heard probably this morning, as you said, when it comes to reprisals, that there are very, very specific possibilities. Some possibilities we have raised already, because the Secretary General at the moment produces each year a report, and in which he really mentions all those governments who have really, I would say, had reprisals on any kind of civil society who came and brought their testimony to the UN, either during the UPR or during any other Human Rights Council session. And they met afterwards with severe violations when they came home or even when they were here. So we have huge reprisal issues on the table. And I would say the good thing is at the time that the Secretary General puts out this report. But we have already made also proposals that the Human Rights Council should really ask all those governments who have been mentioned in the Secretary General's report should be openly called upon and sort of defend themselves or have something to say. So, I mean, we have brought some of those issues before, but this can still be worked on. And the last one here is ensure that recommendations put forward during the UPR are substantive, actionably and precise. That again goes into the very, very substance of what is coming on the table, and we have seen that sometimes there is so much duplication, and that we, instead of having, say, 50 good, precise recommendations, we have then at the end of the day, we have 350. And it's very difficult to see sometimes for the government what needs to be and what can be really implemented. So all of this you have heard, and it's good maybe sometimes to hear it again, that these are also recommendations which came directly from those people from the ground who have been experiencing, these UPR processes. And that goes to civil society itself, to both to national, regional, and international civil society. And I think it is again and again create cross-regional networks, provide support in context which criminalize or restrict the creation of independent civil society groups, creates secure online platforms. That was still one more possibility when we have very, very, very severe country situations, such as in Uzbekistan or in others, where no independent civil society at all is existing, or if they are existing, they are in hiding. And that's what they say. They should really create very secure online platforms that all those people who have enormous experience but are so much threatened that they at least can really interlink and can also provide the recommendations and can be involved in the UPR process from the beginning. that means from the beginning, from the first and during the process and also after the process. So I think this is definitely, which we have heard more and more, secure online processes. And unfortunately, we see this ever more, even if we have this, and sometimes very spontaneously, we have seen in our own, we have created here some sidelines and side events, and people were all of a sudden, they were not there with their names, they were not there with their countries, nothing, but somehow I had photographed them, and all of a sudden it was there, and so we feared the reprisals immediately afterwards and had to really immediately intervene very, very strongly. So, I mean, to see that some kind of security is, of course, number one, in order that those people who feel very, very much threatened, that they are the ones who getting possible in a possible environment where they still can contribute. This is very, very, very important. So, I mean, that was now a little bit out of a report which we have done on civil society, CIVICUS, as trying to test what we have seen, being so much involved ourselves and with our members. And this is the outcome for the moment. And I don't know if we should stop here and have some questions first and interact, or if I should go, but this is a much shorter intervention from our meeting which we had last week here. CIVICUS organized last week a meeting together with Human Rights Watch, with some 47 other civil society organizations from around the world, who are all very, very eager to speak to what I have mentioned already, to the shrinking of the space. And if you get me the other one.